Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, it's incredibly hard for me to believe, but 2 years ago, Mike Whitmire, the co-founder and CEO of a company called FloQast, which was a closed management software company that helps rapidly growing companies, particularly pre-IPO and public companies, close their monthly financial books with great accuracy and speed. He joined me on the podcast way back then, but of course, the world has changed so much in the last 2 years. And I suspect that the needs of their customers have changed. The direction they're taking has probably changed a little bit too. So I invited Mike back onto the podcast to explore how tech is revolutionising the finance function and almost on a mission to make it more of a strategic business function. And I thought it'd also be a great opportunity to explore the role of automation now in supporting forward-thinking CFOs and upskilling in the finance function, and how tech can help accountants basically achieve a better work-life balance in the office, especially during the period of the Great Resignation. So much has changed. I'm interested in what Mike's been up to and the direction of the company and the role of technology and different technologies that they're embracing. But enough scene setting from me. Buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to LA, where Mike Whitmire is waiting to join us again. So a massive warm welcome back to the show. It's hard to believe it's actually been 2 years since we last spoke, but can you just remind the listeners about your role and the kind of problems that you're solving with tech over at FloQast?
Yeah, of course. It's been a heck of a 2 years as well. So my name's Mike Whitmire, co-founder, CEO of FloQast. And I think one of the stranger entrepreneur things is I'm actually a CPA by trade. So an inactive CPA, did accounting here in I worked in audit for about 3.5 years and then moved over to work inside of a private accounting department where I helped go through the IPO process. We were at about five people in accounting when I joined and scaled up quickly. It was a really fun experience, but a lot of hard work and a lot of effort went into it. And a lot of it was because there were a ton of manual processes and it was poor collaboration on the accounting department. And that ultimately led me to recognize, like, hey, this month-end close and reconciliation process, super nerdy, very niche process, but incredibly important for running your entire business. And there's really no good software to help with it. So once I had that epiphany, I decided to leave. Cornerstone was the company I was at, decided to leave Cornerstone and start working on FloQast. That was in late 2012. And so we're creeping up on 10 years of doing this at this point. And, fast forward to today, we work with some of the best companies in the world. We have about 1,600 companies closing on FloQast, a lot of really recognizable brand names, a lot of sports franchises. We've done really well in the tech scene and everything. And so been a lot of fun. And as a company, we are venture backed. We're high growth. We've raised over $200 million. We've did a big round since the last time you and I spoke in the middle of that. So maybe we'll chat about that a little bit. About 500 employees, growing quickly, and headquartered in Los Angeles with offices in London and kind of remote employees all over the States as well.
Wow, that's incredibly cool and great to hear too, because as we were talking about before we started recording today, the world has changed so much since we last spoke. So it's great to hear that you're doing so well still. And I'm curious, how has the world of accounting workflow automation, how has that evolved since we last spoke? Has much changed?
Yeah. I mean, when you and I chatted, we would have been a few months into the remote work environment with COVID and everything. And that definitely accelerated demand for something like what we do. The close is a really difficult process because you have a lot of people working on it in concert, and everything has to get done in a certain cadence and by deadlines to get the financial statements out. And just being remote makes that collaboration that much more difficult. So purely the pain point around collaboration increased pretty significantly. And we found that a lot of accountants aren't going back to the office, or at the very least, the entire team is not going back to the office. So as soon as you have that remote person on the team, you really need something like a FloQast to help with that cloud-based collaboration. And then the other thing that's happening, it's a very macro trend. So if you take a step back, there are fewer people majoring in accounting today. There are more people leaving the field altogether to go do different things. And then we have more people retiring than ever as well. And so there's this serious talent crunch within the accounting world. And that means that you really need software to offset that that work that exists today. And so using things like FloQast, and not just FloQast, there are a ton of great pieces of software that automate really manual and mundane work. It's just becoming very much a necessity because there aren't enough people to do this job. The economy keeps growing, but the number of accountants isn't growing at the appropriate pace to follow that. And so you need technology to help offset it. And I think that's part of what's driving our success over the last couple of years.
Wow, I had no idea. I know there's a huge tech talent shortage at the moment. I had no idea there was a shortage of accountants too. I'm curious. You probably don't know the answer to this, just me and my curious mind, but what are those accountants going off and doing? Do you know what kind of industries they're joining?
A lot of them are heading to FloQast. We have about 200 accountants at FloQast doing a variety of roles, anywhere from, product management, product marketing, sales. We have a whole sales team full of accountants. So, but I don't think we're driving the hundreds of thousands of people leaving the field. But it's, accounting is a really great fundamental skill set to have with business, and it puts you in a position to do a lot of different things around a corporation. So, the easiest shift is just looking at, hey, I don't want to do backwards looking accounting anymore. I want to be a little more future thinking and just move over to finance. And you can start thinking about doing forecasting and modeling, and it's a little more strategic. So some people find that interesting. That's sort of the easy shift. But a lot of people are dropping out to try new businesses, be entrepreneurial. Being an entrepreneur is really, really hot and cool these days. And if you have some baseline business acumen for being an accountant, you're actually in a really good position to just give something a shot, a side hustle or something like that, and maybe turn into a business and have it work from there. And I think that's actually a lot of what's going on. It's sort of I think it's the under-considered part of what's happening with the talent in our economy is a lot of people have different ways they can make money now with side hustles and enough to live, and they're willing to forego 40 hours a week with a steady paycheck to go try some of those things out and make them happen.
And what about for your customers? I'm curious, have you seen their needs evolving and their needs changing over the last 2 years?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of coinciding with the talent crunch in accounting is also, not only are we doing the same work that we used to do, but now we're being given more responsibility. This to me was the really fascinating thing that happened as part of COVID. We sat down with quite a few of our clients. Zoom is a client of ours. Yelp is another client of ours. So these are, two logos that are really well known out there. They have pretty big accounting functions. And we were spending time with the controller. And I mentioned earlier that we started with the close and reconciliation process. That's a very core workflow that occurs within the office of the CFO. And that's historically what the controller has been responsible for, is overseeing that process. So controller at a business is the person who heads accounting. It's sort of like the right-hand man or woman for the CFO. The CFO really relies on the controller so they don't have to do the accounting work. You know what I mean? Like, CFOs don't want to do the accounting. So if you ask any CFO what the most important thing to them is, they'll say a great controller, because I don't want to worry about accounting. It's that important. And so the controller historically has been accounting, but now we found through the usage of FloQast that they're taking on a lot more responsibility than just the close and accounting. They're doing things like Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, SEC reporting. They're overseeing FP&A workflow now, making sure that team is on the right track and getting board minutes prepared and all that kind of stuff. And then, broadly speaking, across the whole office of the CFO, there are many other workflows that are either standalone or play into the close. And so what we saw during COVID was all of a sudden a lot of our clients were hacking FloQast for non-close workflows. And it was truly hacking the application. Like, it would mess up our dashboards, our analytics we offer, and all that kind of stuff. And so we were asking him, why are you doing this? And he said, both of the controllers go, hey, I'm responsible for all of this. I don't want to log into multiple applications to see where everything stands. And you guys are the best workflow tool. So I'll just log into FloQast. I'll give everyone else licenses. They can sign off on their work, communicate through that. And then, I have a good sense of what's going on for all of my responsibilities, and can report up to the CFO that much better. And so we're like, wow, that makes perfect sense. Sounds great. I think we have a little bit of work to do on the product to really support those use cases and make it happen. So we made an abrupt product direction change when COVID hit and we found out about this. It was just such a no-brainer. We pivoted quickly, started building to accommodate these needs. And now well over half of our clients use FloQast for processes outside of the close. The close are our bread and butter, but over half of them at this point are using us for other processes that live under the office of the CFO.
And over the last 5 years, I would say, I've seen the IT teams go from a transformation themselves. They've gone from just fixing things, keeping the lights on, giving you a new laptop and computer, etc., to actually being a business enabler and being right at the heart of everything. But from the finance world, can you expand on how tech is revolutionising the finance function to also make that more of a strategic business function too?
Yeah, and I actually think it's going both ways. So just quickly back to your question around where account's going. Another area within a business is actually to operations. And so we've seen this as a pretty consistent trend. And I think accountants are very well suited to be in operations. So let me just take a step back and explain what operations is, because it can be a little bit of a broad, like, what does that really mean? And quite simply, operations is how your business gets stuff done. It's the how behind running the company, and what you do is the responsibility around doing operations well is first and foremost is writing everything down that you do. So this is like nitty gritty process, procedures, policies. Here's everything we do on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly cadence to make sure we're pushing the business forward. And then that plays into data as well, having all of your data centralized in one location to be able to report and make decisions, and then have that operational rigor to provide the data to the strategic people who can then make decisions really quickly from there. And then it's putting rules, regulations in place, making sure you're complying with all that, and then folding in the appropriate systems, technology, and IT to bring all that data and make reporting super easy. So operations is a fairly broad term, but put simply, it's how the company runs. And that's an area where it makes a ton of sense for accountants to go into that field, because one of the misconceptions with accountants is that we're number crunchers, right? That's the bean counters, the number cruncher thing. And the reality is, like, technology does math for us. You don't have to be good at math to be good at accounting. That's not how it works. Accounting is about rules. Accounting is a puzzle where you're pulling all these numbers together and figuring out how things work. And it's really more about problem solving and rules of business than anything else. And so if you're good at rules of business and problem solving and understanding processes and procedures, because you're already working with other functions around the company, you're well suited to plop into that role and start doing that. So I'll shut up in a second. But for example, our operations team at FloQast is all former accountants. It's headed up by a former CPA, and he's responsible for like all that stuff: workflows, processes, policies, procedures, data, systems, integrations, making sure everything's centralized and reporting up. And dude knows business, and so it puts him in a really good position to have intelligent conversations and structure things appropriately. So as executives, we get what we need.
And I think if we were to go back 3 years ago, words like automation and RPA were treated with a certain amount of caution and maybe even suspicion. But I think that has completely changed now as people see the value in it. So can you tell me more about the role of automation and how it actually supports forward-thinking CFOs?
Yeah, and that's and sorry, to answer your original question from before, it's that automation that's allowing accountants to be more strategic, and it's really more operational in their role. And I think one of the things accountants are good at is if they have the time to do it, is finding efficiencies and ways to become better as an organization. Because you know the old trope of, if you want something done quickly, give it to the busiest person you know. That's very true, because people who are super busy figure out efficient ways to get stuff done. And I would say accounting fits the bill on, we're always given a lot of work. We have to do a lot of it manually. And so we're just pretty good at doing things as efficiently as possible. And when you give someone time and you have that mindset of, how do I become as efficient as possible? That's a beautiful combination, because that's how you get better as a company and close your books faster, have cleaner audits, get your financial statements out faster, make sure things are more accurate. It's like you're able to do all those things instead of just tread water and try to get through the next, board meeting.
And it's great you mentioned there about closing the books faster, because there is this rise of fintech going on at the moment, plus automation and RPA and all these different tools. I'm curious, do most CFOs in a corporate environment accept that they need to change, or is there still a slight resistance? What are you seeing?
I think they're getting there. It's been progress over time. I mean, a CFO today versus when we took our product to market in 2015 has a very different mentality. It's more, it's back to, how do we get better? I think there's a recognition that the talent crunch is very real, and I'm not in a position to just hire more accountants and throw bodies at the problem. That's simply not possible anymore. And so I need to think a little bit differently. And the way to think differently is to turn to IT and technology to offset all of that. And I think you had a lot of forward thinking ones early on. Like, quite frankly, it was probably the recently promoted people who were just coming out of doing this work and were like, oh, I got to get this stuff off my team's plate. And they were more open to technology. And now when you're talking to the more seasoned CFO who hasn't really been in the seat doing this work for, call it 15 or 20 years, they're a little more removed from it. That's where these, bigger firms are coming in with this financial transformation message, and you got to do everything differently. And, it's going to cost you $10 million to shift your organization and transform them, but it's the future of everything. And it's a big pitch, a lot of arm waving and everything, but it can be really impactful if you're a company of that size with the money and the IT resources to do it. It makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of CFOs are getting way more on board with taking on these bigger projects with the spirit of like, hey, it's going to be inefficient for a while, but coming out of the back end of it, we're a much better organization. So to answer your question, yes, I think every CFO is now becoming more accepting of technology.
I think one of the things that fascinates me is the parallels between finance teams and IT teams. They've both got the tech skills shortage, having to consider upskilling, reskilling people because the tech talent shortage is so dire at the moment. But can you tell me more about upskilling in the finance function and continuous talent optimization and retaining staff? How's that going?
Yeah, it's within accounting, it really depends on what your mindset is. There are many people who just want to come into work, they want to do 40 hours a week, do the same job and head home and not have something that's too stressful and get their inflation raise every year and they're good to go from there. That's very common, and there's an important place in accounting for that. Like, as a controller, I would very much appreciate having continuity in a certain seat and not having to constantly, train new people into doing this job for a year and then move on from there. So there's that mentality, which is, in my opinion, like very underappreciated and super important for building a world-class finance and accounting function, because you just need that stuff done in a reliable way. And then you have more your traditional pain millennial who wants to get promoted every single year, and you got to figure out how do I up level them, how do I give new responsibilities, how do we figure this out? And when you're in a startup in a rapidly changing environment, we're in a good position to do that for our team. There are always a zillion things that need to get done. So if you want more work, there's plenty of work to go around. You can take on something new, and that, in my opinion, is how you actually up level is. And this was my approach as a senior accountant, is it's just grab the next project and kind of do it on your own. If you want to drive your career and go figure out the next project you want to work on, what's some extra work that's going on around my department, and go help with that. And so I actually come from a place of, I don't know if it's my responsibility to figure out every single thing that's going to drive your career and set you up for it. I do know there's a lot of work around FloQast, and let me know where you can be impactful, and you're probably going to be impressive, and it's probably going to help drive your career from there. So I do a little bit of that, but we do some career guidance around here and help people get promotions passed. But it's super easy at a startup because every 6 months there's some new role that people can apply for or take a look at, and the reality is, if you're smart and hardworking, positions will open up, you'll get promoted, and it'll be good for your career.
And something else that we've seen over the last 2 years, of course, we came out of the pandemic and it was all about the great resignation and people questioning what they want out of life and wanting greater flexibility and where they work and finding a better balance. So how do you see technology helping accountants in particular achieving that better work-life balance at work? And does it even exist? Is a question too.
No, I mean, I genuinely think remote work really helps with the work-life balance, like purely not it, right? I live in LA, which is one of the more extreme examples of this. But if you have to drive an hour or an hour and a half to work every day, that's 2 to 3 hours of your time that's just gone. And the reality is, if you're sitting at home, you're probably going to work for some of those hours. And so you're more productive just from that in and of itself. And so the remote world for accountants, where you don't have to be super collaborative, you don't have to be on site every day to have those conversations. It's more somewhat regular reporting around your status and whatnot. That really has helped a lot. And not just that, it's actually oftentimes not being around people is way more efficient, because you can just put your headphones on, focus on what you have to get done and knock it out, particularly when you're dealing with that boring manual work where you just need to be able to focus and zone in on it and get it done. So I think the remote world has driven a lot of efficiency. And then, of course, not to beat a dead horse, but you bring more technology in place, you implement more things, you get that manual work off your plate, and you're able to be that much more productive and more of an administrator of a system rather than a doer of manual work that can be easily messed up.
And you've been on an incredible journey over the last 2 years alone. And just chatting to you now, I'm able to see just how much has changed in your industry in that 2 years. But what's next for FloQast? Where do you go from here?
So as a company, we've actually changed our mission a little bit over the last 2 years as we started to recognize that accountants are being given more responsibility than ever. We have this issue with a talent crunch that's out there. And so how do you support this future of accounting where there's more responsibility but less people to go around? That's a really difficult spot that the industry's in altogether. And I feel like we're in a really good spot to help because we've built an application that, somehow we have very fortunately stumbled into this world where the close is really important, but they're managing all the workflows. And we happen to have an application that our clients love and can support that future of the industry. So how do we continue to build our product in a way that supports this operational vision that's out there and is going to occur for the world of accounting? And then also, how do we make accounting a little bit more exciting again? How do we help recruit people into the field? How do we help retain people that much better? And so we have a couple side initiatives around that. Like, I'll go ahead and plug FloQast Studios here. So we have some entertainment that we're creating to try to shed a light on what accounting is actually like. There are a lot of misconceptions out there around the whole bean counter. Do you do my taxes? Stuff like that. The reality is that's a small percentage of accountants. And so we're trying to put out a little bit of entertaining content to really highlight what the accounting industry looks like. And then also on the side, we're going to start a kind of a boot camp or a trade school for accountants. So this will help get people into the field really quickly. It'll fill this gap where it's very difficult to recruit people into a staff accountant role. Oddly enough, because of the way the education system's set up here, it's nearly impossible to hire a staff accountant who majored in accounting. It's super weird. So I think there's an opportunity for us to plug that gap and really just help elevate accounting altogether. So I feel like through entertainment, education, and building products that support the workload that's going on, we can really help drive the profession forward and elevate all of accounting. So I don't know, I've never loved accounting more than I do now. I think there's a really exciting future for the profession, everybody involved in it, and it's going in a really good direction. And our goal is to support that entire movement towards a better future for accountants.
Incredibly cool. One of the things that's changed since we last spoke is I always let the guests leave everyone listening with a personal note of inspiration. So I'm going to ask you to leave everyone listening with either a book that has inspired you that we can add to an Amazon wish list, or a song that has inspired you or just helps you get your head in the zone when you're staring at accounts that we can add to our Spotify playlist. What would you choose and why?
All right, this is a little random, but I was just doing it yesterday. So I have a daughter who's about to turn 5, and singing and dancing with your kid is one of the like most fun things out there. And she's currently very into Katy Perry's song "Roar." And so yesterday we were singing "Roar" together and just hanging out and having a good time. And so I'll go with song. My current song right now is Katy Perry's "Roar," and it's just like hanging out with my family. I work a lot on FloQast. You're very focused on this. It consumes a lot of brain power, but at the end of the day, why do you do it? It's to support your family, be in a better place when you're spending time with them, and hopefully have a good rest of your life together. And so it helps you keep things in perspective. And I'll say that's my favorite song. And then in conjunction with a ton of Disney songs, Moana, Frozen, all that good stuff. That's getting blasted around the house a lot, but I like the Katy Perry one right now.
Awesome. And can you just sing the chorus for us?
No. And you're gonna hear me. Oh, I got it. Yeah.
You sure?
I was about to do it. I'll take the cutoff though.
But before I let you go, for anyone listening who wants to find out more about FloQast and everything we've talked about today, what is the best starting point for everything?
I mean, definitely check us out at FloQast.com, and it's FloQast with a Q, a little weird. So FLOQAST. You can check us out at FloQast.com. We have a good social media presence as well. If you want to check us out on LinkedIn, you can follow me. I have a book and stuff, and we have a good just general FloQast presence. And also, if you want to see FloQast Studios and learn a little bit more about the entertainment we have going on that side, we have a YouTube channel called FQ Studios. And I would suggest our first web series that we put out, which is called PBC, stands for Prepared by Client. And it covers the sort of dynamic between an auditor and an accountant engagement and what that looks like over time. So check that out. That's our new comedy series to hopefully highlight the accounting world a little bit.
Awesome. Well, I'll have those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. And when I put the blog post on my website, I'll also embed that video so people can check that out too. And just love learning more about what you've been doing over the last 2 years, how technology is revolutionising the finance function to make it a more strategic function. But more than anything, just for a good old-fashioned catch-up. And we've got to make ourselves a promise that it's not going to be 2 years till our next chat. But more than anything, just thanks for joining me again today.
I enjoyed the conversation.
What an incredibly cool guy. I've only got one regret from that interview, and that was that I interrupted him as he was about to launch into Raw with tremendous gusto, I think it's got to be said. He was really going to give it some and sing that chorus, so I've got to learn to not cut in like that. I think we missed some pure gold there, but seriously, cannot thank Mike enough for coming on. He's always pure gold, and just for talking about how technology is revolutionising that finance function, its mission to make it a strategic business function, and also, of course, the role of automation in supporting forward-thinking CFOs and how accountants and CFOs are becoming more open to change. Incredibly cool. But over to you. We may have some accountants out there, people working in the finance industry or anywhere in between. Whatever it is, my door is open to each and every one of you. I want to hear your insights, your thoughts, your experiences. And all you got to do is email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can get me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, just @NeilCHughes. But that's it for today's episode. And it's time to think about what we're going to talk about tomorrow. Today was all about technology, fintech, finance, accountants, but CFOs. But what are we going to discuss tomorrow? Well, I'm going to take a slight turn. It's going to be a completely different topic, and the best way of deciding that is to spin the wheel of fortune. But where it stops, for that, you're going to have to join me again tomorrow. So thank you for listening as always, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.